past two episodes, we've talked about transportation in Apex from two different perspectives. We started with policy, planning, and long term goals. Then we listed to students and what transportation actually feels like day to day.
And what we've learned is that there's often a gap between what's planned and what's experienced.
Transit isn't just about routes on a map or future timelines, it shows up in missing opportunities, longer days, limited independence, and who gets access to what.
In this final episode, we're stepping back to look at the bigger picture. What do all these experiences, observations, and data points tell us about transportation in Apex as a whole?
We'll connect students' voices, town, planning, and our own research to answer one big question.
What would a transportation system in Apex actually need to look like to serve the people who live here now and the people who will live here in the future?
This is where the pieces come together.
Welcome to episode 3 of Next Stop Apex.
In the last episode, we talked about transportation, planning, and long term goals. But for this episode, we want to step away from the plans and focus on reality.
Because transportation doesn't just exist in reports, it exists in waiting, walking, crowding, and timing.
So instead of asking what Apex should do, we asked a different question.
What does transportation in Apex actually look like right now?
To answer that, we conducted our own research using two methods: observations and a poll.
These methods let us see how people move throughout their day and hear directly how residents feel about the options that they have.
One of our first observations took place at a Go Apex Route 1 bus stop on Mason Street. It's a stop that's meant to serve people trying to get to work, school, or daily errands without relying on a car.
We stayed there for a full hour because we didn't want our conclusions to come from a single moment. We wanted to understand what waiting actually feels like when public transit is your only option.
During that entire hour, only one bus arrived,
4 people got on and 1 person got off.
and standing there, watching the minutes pass, that hour felt long.
One rider waited almost 20 minutes, even though the posted schedule said the wait should have been 10.
That gap between what's expected and what actually happens matters, especially when you don't have another way to get where you're going.
What stood out immediately was that the environment around the stop.
There was no shelter, no bench, no clear indication that people were expected to wait there for extended periods of time.
No protection from weather, just a sign by the road and cars speeding past.
People stood close to traffic, checking the road again and again, hoping the bus would show up.
When we compared this to nearby areas like Cary or Raleigh, the difference was too hard to ignore.
In those places, bus stops often have shelters, benches, posted maps, and clear signage.
Even when buses are late, the space itself feels intentional. It feels like transit is something people expect to use, not something that's added as an afterthought.
In Apex, the stop felt temporary, almost invisible, like it wasn't fully meant for people who rely on it every day.
And that comparison made us realize how much infrastructure signals whether public transit is truly supported.
If the bus is late, there's no backup option.
If it only comes once an hour, your entire schedule starts to revolve around it.
And when the space is uncomfortable or unpredictable, that stress becomes part of your routine.
Seeing this firsthand helped us understand why public transit in Apex feels limited, even when it exists.
It's not just about having a bus route, it's about whether the system is built to support the people who depend on it.
This observation revealed a lot about access. Observations are powerful because they show what people don't always say out loud.
When we watched people waiting at the bus stop, we didn't see visible frustration, but we also didn't see ease.
They weren't scrolling uncomfortably on their phones or leaning back like they had time.
They were alert, watching the road, looking up every time a car passed.
That kind of waiting isn't passive. It takes effort.
You can't fully relax when you're not sure if the bus is about to arrive or if you still have a long wait ahead.
And when there's no shelter, no bench, no clear sense of timing, that uncertainty stays with you the entire time.
It changes how you experience the wait. Minutes feel longer, time feels heavier.
This matters because public transit is supposed to reduce stress, not add another layer of it to people's days.
For people who rely on the bus, uncertainty isn't just inconvenient. It can affect work schedules, appointments, and responsibilities they can't easily reschedule.
When buses are infrequent, even small delays can feel huge.
10 minutes late can turn into being late for work, missing a connection, losing pay.
And when the stop itself isn't designed for comfort, that waiting becomes physically exhausting too.
Standing for long periods, dealing with heat or cold, staying aware of traffic around you, all of that adds up.
This observation showed us that the issue with transit in Apex isn't just about where routes go,
It's about reliability
about comfort.
and about whether the system treats the people who depend on it with basic dignity.
When transit feels unpredictable, it sends a message that users have to adjust themselves to the system instead of the system supporting them.
And that's a big reason to why so many people avoid public transit when they have other options.
Because no one wants to build their day around uncertainty.
Public transit should feel like support, not something you have to endure just to get through your day.
To see if we what to see if what we observed reflected how people actually feel, we created a poll and shared it with Apex residents.
We sent it to a mix of students, parents, and local community members because we wanted a range of perspectives, not just one age group.
And the responses lined closely with what we saw at the bus stop.
Most respondents say they rarely or never use Go Apex.
When we asked why, the same themes came up again and again.
Many people said the routes don't go where they actually need to go.
Others shared that buses are too slow to be practical, especially when they're trying to get to work, school, or appointments on time.
Several people mentioned that the schedules don't fit into their daily routines.
When a bus only comes once an hour, missing it isn't just inconvenient, it can completely derail your plans.
What stood out most to us was that many respondents said they would consider using public transit if it were improved.
That detail matters.
It shows that this isn't about people rejecting public transit as an idea.
It's about the system not matching how people actually live.
People aren't saying they don't want to use transit.
They're saying it needs to be reliable, efficient, and connected to the places that matter in their lives.
When you combine these poll results with our observations, a clear pattern starts to form.
Apex residents aren't asking for something extreme.
They're asking for a system that works with their schedules, supporting their routines, and respecting their time. When we put our poll results next to our observations, a clear pattern begins to appear.
The bus exists, but it doesn't come often enough to feel dependable.
The stop exists, but it isn't designed with comfort or safety in mind.
The schedule exists, but it isn't always something riders can rely on.
For someone deciding whether to use public transit, those details aren't small.
They're the difference between feeling supported and feeling stuck.
If the bus only comes once an hour, being late doesn't just cost a few minutes, it costs an entire hour.
That kind of delay changes how people can plan their day.
If the stop has no shelter, then rain, heat, and cold becomes part of the experience.
And that experience sticks with people, long after the ride is over.
Our poll showed that residents notice these issues, even if they don't use the bus regularly.
They understand that the system, as it is now, asks people to adjust their lives around it.
And when transit feels inconvenient or unpredictable, people fall back on what feels reliable.
In Apex, that usually means cars.
Not because people want to drive everywhere, but because the alternative doesn't always feel like a real option.
We also conducted observations at the Green Level High School bus loop during dismissal.
We stayed long enough to see how students actually experience transportation at the end of the school day.
We watched students waiting after school, some standing with backpacks still on, others sitting on the curb or leaning against railings.
Many were checking their phones repeatedly, not out of boredom, but to track time and see if their ride has arrived.
There was a lot of uncertainty in that waiting.
We saw buses fill up quickly as students boarded.
Even with multiple rounds scheduled, the buses still felt crowded.
Some students hesitated before getting on, adjusting bags or shifting around to make space.
At the same time, we noticed long lines of cars forming at the carpool lane right nearby the bus loop.
Parents waiting in traffic, sometimes longer than expected, just to make sure their students could get home.
That contrast stood out to us.
It suggests that school buses alone aren't always meeting the level of demand.
When buses are delayed, overcrowded, or unpredictable, families don't have many choices.
They adapt.
In an Apex, once again, that adaptation often means relying on cars.
Which adds more traffic, longer pickup lines, and more pressure on families who may already be stretched thin.
This observation helped us see how transportation issues ripple outward.
What starts as a crowded bus turns into congestion, stress, and fewer real options for students and parents alike.
Even while we're waiting, the conditions outside completely changed how students experience dismissal. When the weather was bad, students weren't even able to track their buses the same way. Instead of waiting near the loop, everyone was crowded inside the building. Some students stayed seated in the hallways or common areas. Others ended up sitting in classrooms long after the bell rang, just to stay warm or dry. And once you're inside, you don't always hear your bus get called. There's no clear signals, no visual confirmation. So students are constantly checking their phones, asking friends, or rushing outside in the cold just in case. We've noticed several students calling their parents, not because they wanted to skip the bus, but because they were afraid of missing it. For some, calling a parent felt like it was the only reliable backup plan. And once that happens, the ripple effects start. Parents leave work early, cars fill up the pickup line, traffic builds faster than usual, and students who are planning to stay after for practices or extracurriculars have to leave early just to make it home on time. This observation made it clear that transportation issues don't slow things down. They force students to make trade-offs between staying warm or staying informed, between waiting for a bus ride or asking for a ride, and between participating in school life or just getting home safely. Seeing this firsthand showed us how transportation issues affect students in very real, everyday ways. Not hypothetically, but right here, after the final bell rings. Waiting after school isn't just inconvenient.
It pushes everything else back.
It delays homework, clubs, sports, jobs, and even time to rest.
For students, those minutes after school matter.
And when buses are crowded, the experience becomes more stressful than it ever needed to be.
Crowding makes it harder to feel comfortable, especially after a long day of classes.
It turns what should have been a simple ride home into something you have to brace yourself for.
And when students can't fully rely on buses to get them home on time, parents step in.
That means more cars and pickup lines,
More traffic around schools,
more congestion on nearby roads.
Just like we saw public transit in Apex. When a transportation system doesn't fully meet people's needs, they find ways to compensate.
Those adjustments might work on the short term.
But over time, they create new problems.
More traffic, more stress, and fewer real transportation options for families.
This showed us that transportation issues don't stop at the bus loop.
They affect entire households and entire communities.
And they reinforce why reliable, accessible transportation matters, especially for students.
In the bigger picture, our poll results and our observation showed one common theme that continued to show up again and again.
Transportation exists in Apex, but it hasn't scaled at the same pace as the town's growth.
The systems in place are trying to serve a growing population, but they're clearly stretched thin.
For residents, that means fewer realistic options for getting around.
For students, it means less independence and fewer choices about how they spend their time.
When transportation is unreliable, people can't plan their days with confidence.
They have to leave earlier than necessary, build in extra buffer time, or avoid certain commitments altogether.
That uncertainty adds stress, especially for families balancing school, work, and other responsibilities.
And when people feel like they can't rely on transit, they fall back on what feels dependable.
In Apex, that usually means cars.
Not because cars are always the best option, but because they're often the only option that feels predictable.
This pattern shows how transportation issues can quietly shape daily life.
They limit independence, increase traffic, and reinforce the idea that driving is unavoidable.
And as Apex continues to grow, these challenges will only become more noticeable if the system doesn't grow with it.
So, in conclusion,
This episode focuses on what transportation looks like on the ground.
on what people experience while waiting, walking, and riding.
Our poll results and observations tell the same story.
Transportation in Apex exists, but it doesn't always meet people where they are.
When systems don't match daily life, the burden falls on the people using them.
Students plan around bus schedules.
Families adjust pickups.
Residents default to cars even when they'd prefer another option.
This isn't about criticizing what already exists.
It's about recognizing the gap between growth and access.
As Apex continues to change, transportation has to change with it.
Because mobility shapes independence, opportunity, and connection.
Our research shows that people aren't asking for perfection,
They're asking for reliability
for comfort,
and for a system that reflects how people actually live. As we wrap up this episode, we keep thinking about the moments that stayed with us the most. Standing at Mason Street bus stop, watching people check the road again and again. Seeing students at the bus loop refreshing their phones, unsure if their bus has already come or was still on the way. And remembering how during bad weather, students wait inside, listening for their bus to be called, hoping that they don't miss it. Because once you miss it, everything changes. You're suddenly trying to find a parent, asking friends for rides, or waiting much longer than you had planned. Those moments don't show up in planning documents, but they shape how people feel about transportation every day. Our poll showed that people notice these issues, even if they don't ride the bus regularly. They've learned that transit in Apex takes planning, extra patience, and a backup plan. And when people need backup plans, cars become the default option. That's why we saw crowded buses turn into long pickup lines, why missed announcements turned into traffic, and why transportation challenges don't stop with one rider. They spread to families, schools, and entire neighborhoods. This project taught us that transportation isn't just about getting home. It's about whether people feel supported, or left guessing. As Apex keeps growing, those everyday moments matter. Because a system that works shouldn't make people constantly adapt around it. It should adapt to them. This has been Next Stop Apex, and these stories are where the conversation really begins.